Okay, it is 8 o'clock by my watch. We are going to get started. Welcome to disaster preparedness class. This is class number 5. I am Ann Forrest. There's my email address, and I am delighted you're here. As I told folks a second ago, this is going to be a very dense class. There's a lot of information I'm going to pass. Hopefully you've had a chance to print out the notes that I sent, and that will help a great deal. If not, stop me and ask questions as we go, but it is very dense. A lot of folks tell you to make a plan. We're going to talk about what kinds of things should be in that plan and why you make a plan. To plan smartly, you need to know your hazards. Seattle has done a really good job of outlining these hazards, I think. It is a document called the Seattle Hazard Identification and Vulnerability Analysis, the SHIVA. You have a link to it somewhere in your notes. Anybody can get to this. The SHIVA is a large document. These are Seattle's top 18 hazards. They move around as far as priority a little bit. They update this, I think it's every 2 years. They get a lot of input from a lot of folks around the area and they update this, but the top hazards remain the same. And that is, number one is always earthquakes. Always has been since they started it and probably always will be. Not because earthquakes are common, because obviously they're not, but if we were to have an earthquake, it is intense. It will impact a great deal of the infrastructure that we rely on. So earthquakes will always be our top hazard. And if you are prepared for earthquakes, you are prepared for a great many other hazards on this list. So again, this is the top 18 hazards. Seattle updates this list all the time based on information they get. And I wanted to point out that a lot of the top ones, 7 out of the top 9, we are expected to shelter in place. Seattle is not a city where we do much evacuation. So, which is why we encourage homeowners to have what they need in their household if at all possible. And again, earthquakes is on top, always is, and it's not because they're common, it's because when they do happen, a lot of our infrastructure is impacted. You have access to the SHIVA if you're interested, but we do need to know what we're preparing for before we create our plan. So why do I need a plan? And it really is because after a big disaster, you are not going to be able to think clearly. None of us are Jason Bourne or whatever. We are not trained to withstand a large disruption in our world and think clearly. We are not really good at doing that. So make a plan ahead of time so that you aren't relying on your ability to think clearly. And because communications will probably be disrupted after a large event of any kind. Even if the infrastructure is still up and running, everybody's going to be trying to communicate at the same time. And so your ability to get messages to your family members, your loved ones, friends, whomever, is really diminished. You need a plan so that you don't have to rely on communications and so that you don't have to rely on your ability to think clearly after a large disaster. So that's why we need a plan. Communications are likely to be down after an earthquake, and there's just no time. During a house fire, you don't have time to figure out what you should be doing. You need to have a plan and be able to act on that plan without communicating with others in your family. And you're building muscle memory. The more times you go through the plan, the more times you physically walk through it, mentally walk through it, talk about it, the more solidified it gets in your head and the easier it will be able to do when you are shaken up after a large disaster. So that's why we make plans. That's why we write them down. That's why we talk about them. That's why we practice them, to build that muscle memory so that when you are not at the top of your game, your body knows what to do. Your memory knows what to do. It also, I think, creates peace of mind. It's so valuable to know that you have thought through this and you've done what you can. So we're going to talk about a scenario that I think is fairly common. Let's consider it's Thursday. It's the middle of January, so it gets dark really early. It's 3 p.m. Sun's starting to go down. Things are starting to get dark. It's dark, cold, and raining. And everyone in your household, pre-pandemic, everyone in your household is out and about. You're either still at work, your kids are still at school, you're headed to the grocery store because you're headed home, whatever, but your family is out and about. And we have a strong earthquake. That's our scenario. Thursday, middle of January, 3 in the afternoon. You want to assume that you can communicate and then talk through what would you do? What makes sense for your family? talk through it, make the decisions about the smart thing to do, and then remove the fact that you can communicate, because that is very possible that you won't be able to communicate. So that's how you make a plan. You sit down, you talk about it, you talk about worst case scenarios, and then you make a plan, and then you remove the ability to communicate and talk about that plan. But because you've talked about it ahead of time, everybody knows what to expect. Everybody has a fairly clear idea of what the other folks in the household are doing. I'm going to talk about my family plan. In my family, there's 3 household members. Anne is up in the northeast. That's where we live, and I typically am at home. I have a teenager who's in Seattle Center quite a bit of the time, at least Thursday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's where he would be. And then D for Dad. My partner is down in Beacon Hill. On a Thursday at 3 p.m. in January, this is where you typically would find my household members. So let's talk about how we get everybody back together. There's an earthquake, everybody in my family knows to drop, cover, and hold on. We check on those around us, because this is what we're taught to do. We control our utilities. So we take care of the gas, the water, and the electricity in the building we're in. And then we communicate, and that's communicating with other people in our household. So this is how we do it. We text one another, and we, like I said, I think it was last week, make that text count. No emojis, no exclamation marks. It really is get across important information, how you are, where you are, what you're going to do, and the day and the time. So that's what we would put in a text to one another. And we would include our out-of-town contact person on that text chain. Because remember, their job is to forward text in between family members if for some reason we can't get that text to one another across the city. So this is our plan. My partner down in Beacon Hill is a healthcare worker. He will stay there at his hospital. He happens to work at the VA hospital in Beacon Hill. He stays there and he works as long as they need him to. That's his job. We all know that that's what's going to happen. Eventually, when he is released, he will leave and he will walk to the teenager. That's going to take a long time. The city will probably look very different. There may be fires or hazardous material spills he needs to navigate around, but eventually he will make it up to our teenager who is in the Seattle Center area. They will stay together and provide aid because, again, my husband has tons of training. My team has quite a bit of training as well. They will stay and help. They will probably spend the night there, depending on what time he gets to Seattle Center area. We have made provisions for that. They each have a tiny little sleeping bag that they carry with them. We have friends in the area. We've talked to them about that. I don't know how it'll work, but the plan is they probably will spend the night and wake up the next morning and try and figure out how to get to Northeast Seattle. What they're going to look for when they're in the Seattle Center area is how to get across the water. I am going to talk a little bit about this. I haven't done tons of research, but I'll share with you what I have done. And this is for my particular family. But that's the area I'm concerned about them. What's the best place for them to cross that area of the city? And if this doesn't pertain to you, I'm sorry, hang tight. That area in the red oval is what we're going to talk about. Once I get across that area, it will take them about 4 hours to walk home. We all know the plan. We've talked about it ahead of time. If there's a change in the plan, great, that's fine. But at least I kind of know what to expect. My anxiety level is way down because we have discussed the plan and I know what I think they're going to do, even if I'm unable to communicate with them. There are 8 bridges and then those couple of cuts. This is really busy. Sorry about this slide, but what I want to point out is that the Aurora Bridge has been retrofitted. So really, the column you want to look at the most is the far right, the retrofitted bridges. That's what I was most interested in. If there are bridges across, and there are 8 of them, how many of those are probably going to make it through an earthquake? The Aurora Bridge is in pretty decent shape. It was retrofitted in 2012. Oops, let me back up just a second. The other bridge, the bridge number 6, the Ship Canal Bridge, was retrofitted somewhat in 2000. So those are the 2 bridges. Bridge number 5 and bridge number 6 are the ones that I was kind of highlighting. Number 5 is in green, and number 6, it's a little bit hard to see, but the Ship Canal Bridge is in yellow. So 5 and 6 are the 2 bridges that have had some retrofitting done to them. So those are the ones I was most interested in. This is a tool that everybody here has access to. I've probably given you the link to this more than once. It's called the Seattle Hazard Explorer. And what I was looking for in this part of the city was liquefaction. Liquefaction is when wet soils sort of turn to quicksand during an earthquake. And then once the earth stopped shaking, they turned back into solid ground, which is great, except while they were shaking, things started to sink. So when the earth stopped shaking, things are now packed in dirt and they're a little bit hard to get out. So you have to dig them out. So I was really interested in liquefaction. What do the two ends of the bridge, the north side and the south side, what do those look like as far as liquefaction? Because that would be a very difficult terrain to traverse after an earthquake. Those are the two bridges I'm looking at. The green one is the Aurora Bridge. The yellow one is the Ship Canal Bridge. Obviously, the Aurora Bridge looks pretty good. There's no liquefaction on either side of that bridge, either the north side or the south side. On the south side of the Ship Canal Bridge, you can see some liquefaction. Given a choice, I would tell my spouse and my teenager to go for the Aurora Bridge. That might be a little bit safer to cross. The other thing I was looking at was these cuts. They're very skinny. You know, I've been down to the Fremont Cut before. I could easily swim across that. I was also looking for those areas as far as liquefaction. Would the banks be such a mess that it would be really difficult to get down to the water, swim across, and get up on the other side? And really, they don't look bad, either the Fremont or the Montlake Cut. Both of them look pretty good. And then I turned back to the Seattle Hazard Explorer and I was looking for landslides. The yellow on this map are areas that are prone to landslides because there's a slope or soft soil or whatever. And the red dots are actually where they have had landslides at some point in the past. Again, looking at those two bridges, looking at the cuts, not too shabby. The Aurora Bridge, the south end of the Aurora Bridge, has some issue with landslides or potential landslides. So I was a little bit concerned about that. But the cuts look pretty decent. So it's in my head, and this is not scientific, it's just the research I've done. In my head, getting across those cuts looks like it might be very possible. I would like to hope that we have kind of a mosquito fleet that steps up and ferries people across right there where it doesn't take very long to get across. The water is not rushing. You know, either side of the bank is pretty in decent shape. So let's hope that there's people there ferrying people across, but I don't know that that will happen. But if not, I believe my family members could potentially swim across and be okay. Other things I want you to think about when you're talking about your plan is, what is the smartest place to get your household back together? Maybe it's not your home. Maybe it's someone else's home. Maybe it's a family or friend or someone else. Maybe it's you stay at work and everybody comes to you. It's really unique to your situation and your household members. So how, where, and when to get your household back together really depends on what makes the most sense for you. Every family's different. I also want you to talk to your work, figure out what needs to be done. If we were to have a large earthquake, what is your employer expecting you to do before you leave? Are you expected to stay there because you're a healthcare worker and you're needed? That's great. You just need to know that ahead of time. You need to tell your family that you're going to be staying at work because that's really what's the best thing to do. And so you just prepare your family accordingly. Schools plan. I'm going to talk a little bit about this and what schools are going to require of parents after a large disturbance like an earthquake. It is a very interesting plan that they have, and parents need to know about it. And a lot of parents do not know. And then if you have pets, if they're scattered throughout the city, talk to the folks watching them and go, hey, if there was a large earthquake, are you able to hang on to my pet until 3 days afterward, I can come get them or something like that. And if so, what are your plans? Where are they going to sleep? Do you have enough food? All that kind of stuff. If you have folks in your household that rely on you, then what are you doing to take care of them? If you have folks that rely on you, make sure that you have built them into your plan. So all that kind of thinking needs to go into your plan. This slide is about the school reunification plan, and that's what it's called. It's mandated from above that they have a school reunification plan. And this could be after an earthquake. This could be after a large fire. This could be hazardous material spill in the area. But the normal routine of dismissing students and sending them home is completely disrupted. The third graders are not all going to be lined up on the sidewalk at 2:45. Parents will come when they can come. They will pick their kids up willy-nilly, and it will be chaos. So the schools realize that. That's when they pull out their school reunification plan, and that is reuniting one child with the correct adult and sending them on their way. So in this slide, the folks on the left, the bigger wooden dolls, are adults. The ones on the right are kids. And then you are paired up, one child, one adult. Adults need to bring your ID. You cannot walk into the school and say, hey, Mrs. Thompson, I'm here to pick up Leonard. That does not happen. The school goes into kind of a lockdown mode, and they slow things down radically, and they will not let you take your child unless you have brought photo ID. You present your ID, the adults meet in the front of the school, the kids are locked behind closed doors somewhere in the school. You are paired up, and you are probably issued out of the building through a back entrance, because they don't want you walking past all the adults, your kid getting mobbed about, hey, did you see Johnny? Did you see Denisha? How is my child? They want you to just take your child and go on home and let them continue reuniting adults and children. Talk to your school about what this plan is, make them explain it to you, ask them to test it out with them. You do not want to be learning about this plan after a big disaster. Parents' anxiety level will be through the roof, and they will be asked to wait and be patient, and it will be very difficult. I'm going to talk about your get home bag. This is some of the stuff that's in your get home bag, and this is what you should have with you to make that walk home easier. We've talked about how traffic is going to stop, and you're probably not going to be able to drive home. You probably won't be able to catch a bus or light rail or any other kind of mass transit system home. You are probably walking. So what should you have with you that would make that walk home more comfortable? A little bit of water, a little bit of food, some trash bags, a map, a little bit of change. Anyway, it's on your to-do list. Put this in your desk drawer, in your locker at work, in your commuter bag, wherever it makes sense, in your glove box or in the back of your car, so that you have it with you if you ever had to walk home after a disaster. Get home bags are really simple. You guys could have figured this out for yourself. And then make sure that you have those navigation apps downloaded on your phone and the map loaded ahead of time. Emergency supplies. I'm going to talk about 3 different things. This is how I quantify things in my head. You have 3 different kinds of bags. You have a stay box, and that is your 2 weeks of supplies ready to go in your home, because more than likely you will be sheltering in place after a large earthquake. If you can stay at home, if your home feels safe enough to stay there, that's where you should be. That's where you're the most comfortable, you're out of the elements, and that's probably where your supplies are stored. So you have a stay box at home. You have a get home bag in your car or at work or in your commuter bag or whatever, and that's what you need to walk home. And then a go bag, which people talk about all the time. But in my head, a go bag, very small bag, and it's what you would need as you were running out of the house. And that is a completely different thing than the 2 weeks of supplies that you will need to withstand an earthquake. This bug out bag that people talk about all the time. In Seattle, we shelter in place. You are not going to jump in your car and drive away from an earthquake. It's just not going to happen. Get to know your neighbors and start storing supplies in your house, in your stay box. This is the part that may not interest some of you. This is very homeowner specific. So we're going to talk about FEMA and what they can and cannot do. And FEMA does not make you whole after a disaster. You will not be as you were after FEMA has done what they can do for you. So I will tell you what they can do for you. This is how they're set up by law. They will help with housing. This is where the FEMA trailers come in, or they'll put you up in a hotel room or whatever for about 18 months if you need it, but they are not fixing your house. They are giving you temporary housing to help you get things sorted out. That's how they help with housing. They will give you a grant, which is money you do not have to pay back, but it's $32,000 max. And it is to cover things that are not covered by regular insurance. It's getting back and forth to the doctor's office because your car was destroyed in the flood or whatever. So it's a bus ride. Some personal property. What are you going to need to live in a FEMA trailer or a hotel room? What are you going to need to get by for the next couple months until you can figure out what to do next? So it's not much. $32,000 is certainly not going to fix damage to your home. You can't use the money for that. FEMA also offers low interest disaster loans, but they are loans. You have to pay them back. They're not grants. It's not free money. You have to have at least $200,000 of a real estate loss. So this is a loan on top of your mortgage. That's what FEMA does. It does not make you whole. It does not fix everything. It is a Band-Aid at best. One of the things I thought about when I first got to the Seattle area and realized that we were at risk for earthquakes, we're just going to walk away from our mortgage. Screw it, let the bank have the house. So this is what I learned once I thought through that whole thing. In the foreclosure world, you're either living in a recourse state or a non-recourse state. And when I say state, I mean one of the 50 states. A recourse state, the borrower is personally liable for the debt. So even if you walk away, you are never going to walk away from that mortgage. You know, your house may go into foreclosure, but you're still going to be responsible for that. In a non-recourse state, the lender can't do anything to you other than foreclose on the property and sell it for what they can get it for. Washington is a non-recourse state, sort of. So this is my example. Let's say you've been in your house for a while and you only owe $300,000 on it. Excellent. You stop paying your mortgage because your house is so damaged and the city is so different and you just want to walk away. You can go to North Carolina and get a job and start over. Good, I'm leaving. I'm going to stop paying my mortgage and I'm going to let the bank foreclose on my house. Well, that's great. The bank will sell your house and let's say they get $100,000. The problem is there's still a $200,000 difference. In a pure non-recourse state, the bank would absorb the $200,000 difference and they couldn't come after you. But Washington is not a pure non-recourse state. They have such a thing as a judicial foreclosure. So a non-judicial foreclosure means the bank couldn't get a judge involved, the bank can't come after you. But a judicial foreclosure is an option in Washington. The bank can put a lien on all your real and personal property. They can garnish your wages and they can claw back that $200,000. So your ability to walk away from a mortgage in the state of Washington is limited. You might be able to do it, but it's just as likely you won't be able to do it. And they will track you down in North Carolina and garnish your wages until they get their money back. If you have refinanced your house, consult a lawyer because I am not a lawyer. Class next week is preparing with neighbors and the emergency communication hubs, which I've kind of alluded to a little bit in this whole series. Class is June 16th, next Wednesday at 7 p.m.